The Rachel Hollis Podcast is proudly sponsored by Amica Insurance. As Amica says, empathy is our best policy. That's why they'll go above and beyond to tailor your insurance coverage to best fit your needs. Whether you're on the road, at home, or traveling along life's journey, their friendly and knowledgeable representatives will work with you to ensure that you have the right coverage in place. Amica will provide you with peace of mind. Go to amica.com to get a quote today.
Whistle while you work.
From Disney on March 21st, the magical tale
Snow White.
Snow White?
Snow White.
that started it all
I believe you're looking for me.
arrives in theaters.
Magic mirror on the wall.
Experience the Disney classic
Who's the fairest one of all?
like never before.
We haven't even been introduced yet.
Disney Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
There's no reason to change if everything's fine. Like, what's the point? What happened in my life, and I think most people's lives, is that we never really change until the pain is bad enough. The pain of where we are, the pain of what we're going through. That is the greatest motivator and teacher. So for me, it wasn't until I hit rock bottom, like I was saying before, until I made that decision to change, because quite frankly, I exhausted all external options. I didn't know what else I could do. I didn't want to fight this battle anymore and wanted to do something different. I just wanted to avoid whatever this pain was. And that's what led me to constantly seeking out different solutions until finally I was able to find some relief. For me, that was when I hit rock bottom, was when everything started to shift.
Hey guys, it's Rach. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. And I have a favor, which sounds kind of harsh if we just met, but I'm assuming that most of you have been a part of this community for a hot minute. And so I gotta ask, are you subscribed to the podcast? Subscribing to the podcast you listen to regularly is one of the best things that you can do for hosts like me. It helps to support the show and the staff that works on it. It ensures that you never miss an episode when we drop a new one. And here's the cool thing about subscribing. If you do it and then you hate this show, just unsubscribe. It's one click away. In the meantime, if you're listening, we would so appreciate it if you would just tap that button and make it official. Well, I guess I'd love to start for the audience who is not on TikTok and does not know how this book has just taken over everyone's life. Will you give us a quick summation of who you are, Joseph, and how you came to create this work that everyone's so obsessed with?
That's an interesting question, because I don't think my story is that interesting. Like, I feel like everyone says that. But in my specific case, I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So my background is in advertising and marketing. I mainly got into that to help my parents out because they ran businesses. My mom has a bridal business and it was struggling quite a bit. My dad, on the other hand, was also an entrepreneur, but through a series of unfortunate events, he lost like all the businesses, and they actually went into over $1 million worth of debt. So, that was after the '08 crash. I think everyone felt it, but and it was a hard time for everyone. But my parents, being, immigrants from Vietnam, they felt it significantly just because they had nothing already. And so to lose everything again after coming to the country, that was pretty big for them. I was still a kid at that time, but as kids, your parents don't have to explain things to you. You can just feel it in terms of how much stress and anxiety they're going through. So I think for me, growing up, I felt that a lot just because I could sense people relatively well and was quite observant. So it became my task and kind of mission to help them as much as I could. In the beginning, I couldn't do much, but after high school and things like that, then I kind of dedicated my life to help repay them for everything that they did for me. So that's why I started my business. And it was actually pretty successful in the beginning. So I helped my mom's store, and she expanded to multiple stores. Then I helped my extended family and then a bunch of different clients. So I scaled the agency up really well. what's interesting is I kind of accomplished what I wanted to, but at the cost of everything else. So my mental health, my well-being, even my own personal interest, hobbies. I just never did anything for fun other than just focused on the business, growing, helping my parents, and I completely neglected myself. So I had all sorts of issues, mentally. So just in essentially a chronic state of anxiety all the time. I didn't know where my next client was going to come from. I didn't know if we were going to have enough money to come into the next month. Didn't know if we can pay rent. When I first moved out, I had like $1,000 to my name, and rent was $1,800 a month. So that just gives you a frame of reference, and somehow made it through that somehow. So that's essentially what happened. And after all of that, I mean, the business, blew up in a great way, and then it kind of started falling apart because of my own health issues. So I started losing clients. I basically lost almost everything, split with my business partner. I went over 50 grand in debt at the age of like 21. And at the time, my girlfriend, now wife, became hospitalized multiple times because of gastrointestinal issues. So gastroparesis, which is paralysis of the stomach. And so she had to get a feeding tube. So that was all happening at the same time. So I basically hit rock bottom. And that was when I tried everything I possibly could in order to find solutions. So I tried therapy. I tried all sorts of different therapy, like energy work. I mean, CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, inner work, shadow work, right? Doing meditation, doing yoga. I even went vegan for a while just to see if my diet was influencing my mental state. Did acupuncture. I studied all sorts of things like Western psychology to Western philosophy, and then Eastern philosophy, so Zen Buddhism, Stoicism, all those things. Studied Dr. Joe Dispenza heavily as well. And tried everything I possibly could. The interesting thing about all those modalities is that they worked until they didn't. So they helped temporarily, but they never gave me the full sense of peace that I was looking for, at least long term. And I realized that I really only felt peace while I was doing the modality. So for instance, if I was meditating or let's say doing therapy, I felt relief during the session, but after, all the anxiety would come right back when I would have to go back into the real world, right? So that puzzled me more than anything else. That whole entire journey is what led me to trying to figure out the answer from dozens of different modalities. And the book is sort of a summation of that entire journey and kind of like the epiphany that I had.
What do you feel like was the reasoning that you circled around of why do we feel so good when we're in the middle of doing the thing? So you mentioned meditation, and I can think of so many friends that I've had. I live in LA, so take that with what I'm about to say, that have gotten into meditation to deal with anxiety and start doing more and more and more meditation. These are actors or musicians, people who have big pockets of time where they are sometimes like they start meditating literally all day. They're meditating for hours because if they come outside of the meditation, their anxiety swells to a place they can't handle it. So they're staying inside the meditation. But the problem with that is you're not living your life. You're in some instances sort of like disassociating from your body so that you don't have to feel what's going on in your body. So what did you latch on to as the reason why that happens to us?
Yeah, that was the question that plagued my existence, because I was like, there's gotta be a way to integrate whatever I feel into real life. And I can't just live like in those two dual worlds separately and just suffer in real life and then just be fine in the meditative life. I asked myself, what is it in the meditation that allowed me to feel that way? And is it possible to bring that into life where I was actually awake and conscious? So to me, the main premise of meditation is essentially training yourself to let go specifically of thoughts and even our own judgments of those thoughts and even emotions. So it's all about how can we release whatever is in the mind and not become attached to it. Buddha said that, attachment is the root of all suffering. In my book, I kind of foray off of that and say that thinking is the root cause of suffering, which we can get to, a little bit later. But knowing that and the purpose of meditation, I started to realize that or ask myself, is it possible for me to let go of my thoughts while I'm living my life? What would that look like? Through observing myself through meditation and just trying to open my eyes during it and doing work, I started to realize that thoughts are not the problem. A lot of times we believe that thoughts are the issue, but they're not. Thoughts have no effect on us unless we believe them to be true. So if someone says that I'm a purple elephant, that doesn't matter to me because I don't believe that to be true. But if someone said something that I do deeply believe to be true, let's say before doing inner work on myself, if someone called me just insensitive or arrogant or something like that, that would really sting simply because I believe that to be true. But if I know deep down that that's not who I am, that I believe that, or don't even have to believe, but I just want to give more love, more joy, more peace to other people, then that thought, quote unquote, doesn't really affect me. It's less about managing the thoughts and it's actually about managing the beliefs. And this is so important because we actually can't control most of our thoughts. We have over 60,000 thoughts in a given day. How is it possible that we can control every single one of those? Right? We just don't have enough willpower or the energy to do that. And when we try to, we'll just become exhausted and just completely incapacitated. But the good news is that we do not have to control our thoughts. We only, and we can't even control it anyway. So trying to do that would just be a war we already lost. The way that we can kind of escape the mental turmoil is actually to manage our beliefs. We can always control what we believe in, but we cannot always control our thoughts. And that's the best part about it. So that's during the meditation, how do we actually manage the beliefs? What I started to do during these meditations was to observe the thoughts and emotions without needing to judge them. The judgment of our thoughts and emotions is what perpetuates them. The judgment is what creates resistance, and what we resist persists. So as soon as I created space within myself to observe the thoughts that come in and realize that these thoughts are not me, because if the thoughts were me, I have 60,000 thoughts. What happens when that thought leaves me? Did I leave too?
Yeah. Ooh, that's good.
I'm still here.
Yeah.
So what
that's
am
really
I
good.
if I'm not my
Yeah.
thoughts? So that means we're something beyond our thoughts. And that was the really big epiphany that I had.
Yeah, I remember the first time I actually went and saw a brain doctor several years ago, and he said, you don't have to believe every stupid thing you think. And I mean, like, obviously this is the basis of your work, but I genuinely, it had never occurred to me
Right.
because I thought if I'm thinking it, it must be true. And I love this about me, but I get deep in my feelings. I can be very dramatic. I like to sit with my thoughts and kind of and I have lived my whole life. I'm 42. I've lived my whole life sort of reinforcing this habit again and again that if a thought pops in my brain, oh my gosh, I better unpack this and sit in it and pray and meditate and think it over and what does this mean? And he said that to me, and it was the first time, probably to some extent what you're saying, that it was like, you aren't that just because you're thinking it doesn't mean it's true. And I was accepting every single thing that passed through my mind as gospel. So that little shift in my head was so huge. And what you're talking about, this practice of observing your thoughts, is a game changer. And I think we all
yeah.
know it would be great if we meditated, but even if listeners aren't there yet, if they're not meditating regularly, I love this idea of acceptance and just can you see that thought as oh, that's interesting. Okay. Oh, wow. That I oftentimes, if a thought pops up and it's negative, I'm like, oh, okay. That frame of reference is still here. That narrative's still playing out. That's interesting. But just understanding that you don't have to buy into what your mind is saying is so stinking important. Can you dig in a little bit to why our brain is even circulating these thoughts? I mean, constantly just popping everything into our head, goes into our wiring that goes back a millennia. And I'm sure you've got some wisdom on that.
Yeah. So I'll keep it pretty broad. I won't get too scientific because that's not my specialty
Yeah.
anyway. But at the very least, from my understanding and just from observing myself and how I react to certain things, and just looking back in history and our biology, I mean, we are programmed to survive. Just biologically, we want to live and to have offspring and to kind of multiply in that way. Because of that, our brain has a bias towards negativity or danger. So what will happen is it will take all of the, thousands or even millions of different inputs in our environment, other people, thoughts, TV, whatever it is, and bring it up into our minds, and it filters out all of these different data points to see what is actually dangerous, what is a threat, and it will constantly go back into your past to try to predict the future to prevent you from getting put into any trouble, anything that might threaten your life or anything like that. The good thing about that is that that was very useful when we were living in tribes, in nature, and literally our lives were at stake every single day, every single hour, every single minute. It's like anything could happen to us. But nowadays we're a lot safer. Not everywhere, right? But comparatively to our ancestors, things are a lot safer. We can go to work relatively safe. We have friends, we have family, we have shelter. A lot of people here. So I'm mainly speaking to those probably in like America and have a home and things like that. It's a little bit different if you don't have a home, but generally, speaking, the psychological kind of strategies that we're talking about can still be used there. But because of that, we always have a bias towards those things. And it will kind of jump to worst case scenario to try to protect us. That's all it is, very, very simply. And through meditation or any other modality, we can essentially teach ourselves to not treat everything as a threat to our existence. If there's a comment that someone said, like our mom said something about us that we didn't like, we don't have to treat that as something that harms our self-worth or what we think about ourselves or anything like that, or that we might not survive if we don't have her approval. That can apply to anyone, right? Like our boss, our friends, anything. So it really teaches us to create space.
Yeah.
That's what this practice does. You don't have to meditate, right? But it does help. A practice that I love doing is just how can I not judge the situation, or just practicing neutral and compassionate observation versus jumping right to judgment, saying like, this is the worst thing ever, or, I'm worthless, or this is, why does this always happen to me? Jumping to those conclusions very rarely helps the situation if you kind of ask yourself about it. Something I always like to ask is, how often has overthinking actually helped me? And I love this quote. I forgot who it was by, but I've heard somewhere that they were saying that overthinking doesn't solve problems, it creates them.
Look, everyone knows that toilet paper is not created equal. Not all rolls are the same. Some are too soft. Some, can we say, sort of crumble, if you know what I'm saying? Then other toilet paper is so strong that it can actually hurt. And let's not even talk about the toilet paper that is so thin, it doesn't get the job done. Angel Soft is soft and strong and always affordable. Come on, life is too short. There's too much going on. I don't want to have to overthink this. So pick up a pack of Angel Soft in the toilet paper aisle of your nearest retailer. That's Angel Soft, soft and strong. Simple.
Whistle while you work.
From Disney on March 21st, the magical tale
Snow White.
Snow White?
Snow White.
that started it all
I believe you're looking for me.
arrives in theaters.
Magic mirror on the wall.
Experience the Disney classic
Who's the fairest one of all?
like never before.
We haven't even been introduced yet.
Disney Snow White, only in theaters March 21st. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
You mentioned something too, this idea of our minds, which are these sort of ancient machines going back a very long time, will sift through past experiences to predict what might be happening in the future. And you and I both read Joe Dispenza. So you'll track with what I'm saying here, that using that as our frame of reference, it stands to reason then that you're also just going to recreate the same scenarios that you have been inside of if you're allowing that to be leading the way, right? So if your brain is constantly looking at past experiences and using that to judge what might happen in the future, and you're not doing anything to control your mindset or help yourself think through it in a more legit way, you're just going to recreate the same scenarios again and again and again. I think that's how we get stuck in these ruts in our life where we're like, my gosh, for the last 5 years, like I'm still dealing with this anxiety. I'm still self-doubt. I'm still. It's because you're just recreating the past. there is no future because you're just recreating what's already there.
Yeah, and we usually remain stuck in that state for quite some time. And that's not our faults, right? That's just how we're wired until we learn that there is another way, right? Like, for example, you and I didn't learn that we didn't have to believe everything that we thought. And until we did, we were like, oh my gosh, that's a new neural pathway that I have, a new skill that I have learned that I can apply to this situation. Einstein kind of famously said, like, you can't solve problems with the same level of consciousness that created it. So if we just keep going back and doing the same thing over and over again, that's the definition of insanity. So we have to try something different. And that usually means going into the unknown. The only way to create a different future than the one that we have now is to go there, which is scary, but I would rather go towards fear than to relive the same cycle of suffering that I already know. But a lot of times that fear is going to keep us stuck there.
Yeah, well, most people, I don't know that they have that kind of courage. I think it's far more common for people to continue to choose, what's that expression, like choosing a known hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Because
Right.
at least this is a hard that you know. This is especially relevant for anybody who really, truly has the fight or flight response triggered in a real way. Like if you have PTSD or if you've gone through things that make you get extra terrified of doing any kind of change, of making anything different than it currently is. There is that fear of like, okay, well, at least this is something I know how to do. I know how to do this hard. I don't know how to do that hard. I feel like in your life, you have examples of situations where you had to force yourself to take a step in the direction of an unknown heaven. What did that look like for you? And what were some of the things that helped you make that change?
Yeah. So what I will say is I'm really not that courageous. um, I, it, what happens is life will not so gently nudge us into the unknown, whether we want to or not. Uh, an example of this is that we don't. There's no reason to change if everything's fine. Like, what's the point? What what happened in my life, and I think most people's lives, is that we never really change until the pain is bad enough. The pain of where we are, the pain of what we're going through. That is the greatest motivator and teacher. So for me, it wasn't until I hit rock bottom, like I was saying before, until I made that decision to change, because quite frankly, I exhausted all external options. I didn't know what else I could do. I didn't want to fight this battle anymore and wanted to do something different. I just wanted to avoid whatever this pain was. And that's what led me to constantly seeking out different solutions until finally I was able to find some relief. So for me, that was when I hit rock bottom, was when everything started to shift. Once I exhausted all those external options, that's when I started looking internally to question the mind that was causing all of these issues. Because seemingly on the surface, everything seemed relatively okay. I had a roof over my head. I had a business or a job. Things seemed fine, but I was just constantly worried. And so that crippling anxiety finally brought me to a breaking point. And I think most people need to hit like a rock bottom before things change. And once they do, then they don't have to hit that anymore. And I mean, there's ways to change without needing to hit rock bottom, but generally it isn't until it gets really bad that we're like, okay, fine, like fine life. Like I will finally do something different. I will finally let go. I will finally not care what other people think anymore. I will finally give myself the peace that I deserve, even if I don't think I do. And then at that point, when we that's the point where the ego dissolves, right? It stops fighting and essentially just like, it, evaporates into thin air. And that is where freedom is. When we're able to kind of separate ourselves from that part of ourselves that constantly critiques ourselves, constantly criticizes other people, situations, constantly wants to control everything. So when we get to that point and we're like, okay, finally, like it's fine, I'll just let go. And that's when everything changed for me. And particularly just letting go of like my own judgment of everything. Like I like to kind of think of my thoughts as almost every single thought in my mind is an opinion. It's not true.
Yeah. Yep.
Everything.
That's real.
About, like, let's say it's raining, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I got to go get groceries. It's like, this rain is the worst. This ruined my day. Like, why does it? all of that is an opinion.
Yep.
That is not fact. The fact is that it's raining.
Yes. Yes.
So in my book, I kind of distinguish thoughts versus thinking. The thought is usually a neutral observation or an intuitive prompting. Thinking, on the other hand, is negative judgment about the thought or the situation. So let's say for the rain, the thought is it's raining. Thinking is this is the worst. I'm so unlucky. This completely ruined my day, right? That can apply to virtually anything. So the negative judgment, the thinking about it, is where the suffering comes from, not necessarily the event. There are times where the event is painful, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to emotionally suffer, especially if the event already passed. When the event already passed, it's not here anymore, but we keep going back into it and
Yes.
reliving it, like you were saying. And that's what creates the emotional suffering. And that's where 80-90% of our suffering is. It's from the past, not necessarily in the present.
So for people who really identified with what you just said, this idea of going back to a past experience and sort of reliving those emotions again and again, how would you suggest that they stop doing that? How do we stop
Yeah.
being haunted by these past experiences that are still hurting us today?
Yeah, great question. So I'll kind of bring up a thought experiment that I love to take people through to kind of see a different path. We all go through immense challenges in our lives. Like I haven't met a person that hasn't had a lot of struggle. How intense or difficult the struggle is obviously varies from person to person. But I kind of view everyone as going through their own struggle. I don't really compare them, and that's for them to hold, right? And I want to honor that. So if that's the case, I've also seen that a lot of people have gone through immense trauma. But the interesting thing is, how is it possible? Like, let's say if our past defined who we are now and it completely defined our future, how is it possible that two people who have gone through similar traumas, how is it possible that they could have different lives from each other? Like one can kind of go through this traumatic experience and then spiral downwards into a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, loses all sense of self-worth. But another person who has gone through some similar trauma can become empowered by it and has healed that part of themselves to find peace and fulfillment and joy, and now wants to spread that with others. Like, how is that possible if they both have gone through similar events? So to me, that's when I kind of like had an idea of like, it's not the events that define who we are. Our emotions do not come from events, but from our own thinking about the events. The only difference between those two people that have gone through similar experiences is how they think about their past, how they think about what happened to them. One of them probably believes that defines them. That's who they are. They cannot change that. The other person probably believes that, well, that happened to me, but that doesn't have to define me. This doesn't have to influence the way that I live now. I can choose, a different reaction towards that, and I can kind of go out and share my own experience with others so that they don't have to go through it alone. Very different modes of thinking. One of them is probably very judgmental about the situation, saying, why me? Why the other person? The world is evil. Everyone's out to get me. The other person just says, this happens. This is life. Everyone goes through so many different things. And so what happened is unfortunate, but I can, the best part is I can choose something different. We always have that autonomy. And so it always comes back to that choice. So for me, it was less about what happened and arguing with it, because that past happened. I cannot change that. No amount of, right? Like people can go to therapy, but like, how do people heal from it? Why do people have different experiences from therapy? Like has therapy ever changed the past?
No. But it definitely
how
can
do people
change our
get better?
perspective of it. Yeah, exactly.
Right? So what therapy does, and meditation and a bunch of different modalities, is that it doesn't change the past. It changes how we think about the past. And that is where peace can come from. So that's the shift in perspective. And it comes from choosing and wanting to not having to go through the same experiences over and over again, choosing to let go of the past and choosing to make peace with it, saying like, this is okay. Like, I am safe now. I can choose a different way to live that is more empowering, that is more conducive to peace. That is what I want for myself. And that's essentially setting a boundary for yourself, saying whenever a thought or a situation comes up, like let's say related to the past or triggers that same emotion, it's saying to yourself, I honor this emotion, but I'm not going to let it completely consume me and for me to spiral out of control. I don't have to believe the thought that's saying you're not enough or you're like no one loves you or anything like that. Treating those things as opinions versus truth, and then making the conscious decision to say, I don't want to believe that.
Yeah.
That is not me.
Listeners, NerdWallet wants you to let them do the work for you. Looking for auto insurance? The Nerds will match you with top providers in your area in just a few questions. So getting the right rate for you is as simple as going to nerdwallet.com. After all, letting NerdWallet do the work is more than smart. It's genius. Not all applicants will qualify for the lowest monthly payments. NerdWallet Insurance Services Incorporated. California resident license number OK92033. It's 2025, guys. And if you are busy, you're working, you're trying to make great choices for your life, your health, your family, you've got to start using Thrive Market. Thrive Market's products are 100% non-GMO and free from over 1,000 harmful ingredients. So when you're shopping on Thrive, you know that anything you find is going to be good for you and your family. Plus, you can scan a product you're used to buying, something that's in your pantry right now, and the Healthy Swap scanner will instantly recommend cleaner, healthier alternatives. The best part about Thrive, I think, is that you put things on a subscription. So when the pantry starts getting low, all of a sudden in the mail is everything you need to restock for school lunches and after school snacks. It is the best. Ready for a junk-free start to 2025? Head to thrivemarket.com/Rach and you get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/Rach. thrivemarket.com/Rach. One of the most powerful shifts that ever happened in my life was shifting the mindset of life is happening to me versus life is happening for me. And even if someone can't get on board with that idea, if you just ask yourself the question, how could that have been for me? And I'm speaking as someone who has gone through some really hard, awful trauma. So I'm not just flippantly throwing this around. But if you're like, yes, this happened, I have experienced this, I went through this in my childhood, is there anything that came out of that experience that has made me stronger, better, more empathetic, able to do the work that I'm doing? It is why I'm a writer. It is why I'm a better mother. It is so helpful to me in so many ways of my life. And if I don't look at it through that lens, then it's just this really crappy, awful thing that happened, and I am a victim of life circumstances, and there's nothing empowering in that for me. This shift for me is something that I know some people take issue with because they're like, no, trauma isn't a good thing. No, it's not a good thing. But my God, if you're going to have to walk through something awful, is there anything in it that you can take away from the experience other than life is hard and unfair and people are mean and choose the empowering thought every single time versus the one that hasn't got you anywhere for the last decade.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I know it's pretty difficult to kind of accept that if you're in a difficult situation, and so my heart goes out to anyone that's struggling like that. What helps me a lot is to kind of ask myself a series of questions to see if what I'm doing is actually helping me or not. An example of this would be one of my favorite thought experiments too is asking myself like we were saying before, like how often has overthinking solved the issue or improved my situation? The other one is, to kind of show the effects of constantly ruminating and overthinking is when we're constantly stressed and having a lot of anxiety, like how much thinking is going on about the situation.
That's great. That is such a
It's a
good
lot, right?
question. That's such a good question. I was just thinking like this is something I've taught myself to do is ask, is thinking helping me right now? Meaning, if I get really anxious, I tend to, my mind likes to race when I'm trying to fall asleep. It just has been like that my whole life. And I used to sit with the thoughts, like I told you, because I thought that if I could really think them through, that then they would go
And figure it
away.
out. Yeah.
Yes, I'll figure
You
this
can't
out.
solve
And
them.
it just is literally like pouring gasoline on a fire. So I've
Yes.
taught myself to ask, like, is this helping? No. So then I'm going to do some box breathing and focus on nothing. That simple shift of like, actually, it would be better to not think about anything at all right now, or to focus on like, in yoga, they call it the drishti, like focus on a single point and pay deep attention to that spot on the wall and do some breathing so that I don't think about anything. And if I come back 3 minutes later, even, I'm calm, I'm not freaking out, I'm not anxious, which really does show you the power of those anxious thoughts to make the situation so much worse.
Yeah, and that's the power of it. And I love what you're saying about like how long it took. Most people believe that you have to go through years of therapy, just dozens or if not hundreds of books, and invest so much money into trying to figure out your mind. But all it takes is a few minutes. It's just commitment to that exercise, really. That question of, how much thinking is going on right now. And especially if you can't do anything about the situation, there's absolutely no point in just constantly replaying it in your mind. But if there is something you can do, then we can kind of shift the question and can kind of address the situation, which we'll get to a little bit later. But the majority of the time, we're probably replaying something that we have no control over, that we can't do anything about in the present moment. And so it's generally best to let go of it. And if it comes back up, okay, great. And now we can address it from a calm, grounded state and approach it from a lens of love rather than fear. I mean, how is fear going to help us in the situation, right? And versus approaching it from a lens of maybe peace or love, that's probably going to yield a much better result. So that's why I like to ask the question of, when we're really stressed out and having tons of anxiety, how much thinking is going on? It's probably a lot of thinking. And then the other side of the question is, you are kind of at peace, or even when you're really happy, right? Like think about a time in your life. How much thinking was going on during that time?
Oof, yes, good. This is such a good point. Yeah. You're in it, you're present, you're in the moment, you're not thinking, you're like just feeling, you're vibing, you're laughing with your friends, you're dancing with your partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not thinking, you're being. We're called human beings, not human thinkings, right? And that is our natural state. That's the state in which we are fully ourselves. A lot of times when we're super self-conscious and all those things, it's because we're conscious of the lower self. We're thinking about ourselves. When we are very confident, you're not thinking about yourself. You're fully embodied with who you are. You're fully authentic, right? You can't think about being authentic. That means you're inauthentic, right? You're trying to be something that you're not. It's only when we let go of that notion, trying to be someone or think of anything, that's when we're actually ourselves. But the same thing applies for peace. So that was the series of questions that kind of allowed me to see, oh my gosh, like I'm having so much stress and anxiety because I'm thinking. And on the flip side of that, when I'm not thinking, that's what peace is. And that's where I find it. The next question, the next most natural question is, how do you even navigate life if you're not thinking? That doesn't make any sense. Am I supposed to just suspend all mental activity? And that's not what I'm saying. When I say thinking, I mean negative judgment about a thought or an event. So it's suspending that negative judgment. Play this scenario out for yourself. It's like, how much better would your life be? How much would it improve if you no longer entertained negative thoughts?
Oh, the best ever. The
Right.
best
So
ever.
that's what I mean by not thinking. I mean, it's completely possible to navigate life without needing to believe and entertain every single negative thought that we have. So that's why I say like thinking is the root cause of suffering. It's that negative judgment about the thought or situation. You can definitely go through life without judging anyone or anything. It's like when you're walking through nature, like, like how often are you judging every single tree, every single branch, every single leaf, saying this is pretty, this is ugly, this is not ideal, this is not symmetrical? Like no one does that. When you're climbing a mountain, you're just amazed at the view. You're not judging anything. But when we go around life and we look at social media and we look at different people, we say, oh, that person's this way, they're that way, they're evil, they're not. There's so much judgment going on, and that's where all the suffering comes from. But if we just observe and are able to just be and appreciate things as they are, not needing to label things as good, bad, right, wrong, but just being there, neutrally observant, then we can actually enjoy and appreciate life for what it is, and approach situations with a lot more like grace than constant fear and trying to manipulate other people or trying to prove ourselves to someone. That's the ideal kind of way to kind of navigate life.
Yeah. You said something too that I feel like is a little bit of a cheat code or you started to say this, and I feel like you're going in this direction of if you are thinking about something that you actually can affect, like if you can actually change the situation, which is one of the greatest shifts we can make as human beings, to start focusing on what we can control instead of what we can't. The empowerment in that is like, number one, can I affect this right now? If the answer is no, great, then it's not serving you. If the answer is yes, awesome, let's do something about it. So I'm leading you down the garden path a little bit because I thought that's where you might be going with that
Yes.
reference.
So that's a great question. Let's take that path, right, of I can do something about this situation. Number one is doing something about the situation going to be in alignment with what I truly believe, my values, my beliefs? If not, then there's no reason to kind of continue. But if you do believe in it and it feels aligned with who you are, your higher self and all your values, then awesome. Let's kind of go down that path. In this way, we want to use thoughts instead of thinking. So in the beginning, I said thoughts are neutral observations or intuitive promptings. The intuitive promptings is very important. That is kind of your intuition. And in many times in life, there's not always a clear, logical answer. Where to move, whether to take this job or not, whether to marry this person or not. All these things are likely not very black and white. There's so many different factors to consider. So how do you know what to do, what to choose? In that case, you want to kind of lean into your intuition or your heart, whatever you want to use. For instance, let's say if you think about some of the best decisions you've ever made in your life, who to marry, where to move, some of your friends, your best friends, whether to have a kid or not, how much logic did you use in that particular instance?
No,
right?
It's like it's all gut.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, so that was the most mind-blowing thing when I kind of asked myself the question. It's like every single decision I made, whether to leave college, to go to college, to start this business or not, to pursue the passion or to just follow, the traditional path, all of these decisions that I made was completely intuitive.
Yeah.
It was against the grain. Everyone said, don't do it, stay the safe path, do all these things. But when I followed my intuition or my gut, it led to some of the most amazing experiences that I could have never even predicted because it's in the unknown, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what it's gonna be like. But if I followed the well-paved road of misery and following what everyone else is doing, then I would know for sure what would happen, right? I would just be very unfulfilled. And that's what happened in the beginning until I made that intuitive jump. That intuitive prompting, right? That kind of still small voice in the back of your head that tells you, move here, do this, meet this person, say hi to the person that eventually becomes your partner. That's all intuition. A lot of people just assume, okay, I'll just use all intuition, like never use logic. Like that's not really what I'm saying. It's more so like when it comes to really big, important decisions, that's not black and white. More times than not, you're probably going to want to lean into intuition because no one else can really tell you what to do. No one knows your needs, your preferences, your values, your beliefs, all of these things, right? The type of life that you want to live. Like no one else knows more deeply you than you. So you're the only person you can rely on that. And so, I like to live life by minimizing regret. And so which decision would I regret least in the grand scheme of things 10, 20, 30 years down the road? And usually it's going to be following that gut instinct. And, I'd rather kind of jump into that adventure because I'm suffering anyway, right? So I might as well leap and do something different and suffer a little bit less and enjoy that part of me, that experience, than to sit here and suffer anyway. So that's kind of the decision-making process that I go through. Just asking myself like, okay, what is my intuition saying about this? Let's say, to do something about the situation. What is it saying? Is it to talk to the person? Is it to call them right now? Is it to propose a new idea, right? I don't know what it is, but more than likely you kind of have an intuitive prompting of what you need to do. But then, we're always a little bit afraid to do it. And that's okay, right? As you meditate, as you kind of practice letting go of all of the opinionated negative thoughts in your mind, fear will become less and less convincing. And you'll see that you are bigger than the fear. And that, just on the other side of fear is peace, love, fulfillment, everything you want, and that you can survive. And I mean, you've been through so much already. So it's like, what is fear to you now anyway? Like, you're still here. You're obviously bigger than all of it. So come from that place,
Yeah. And intuition is one of my favorite subjects on the planet. So I could talk to you about this for 9 hours. But I'll also add in, because a lot of women in my community get stuck in analysis paralysis. They're like, well, I could do this. Well, I could do that. And it may even be that your intuition is speaking to you and you're not moving. And so I would also just like to add to what Joseph is saying. You're gonna be okay. The thing that you are being called to do, if you get there and you're like, oh God, I don't know what to do now, you will figure it out, just like you have every day of your life before now. I don't know why we get into this idea that if we don't make the exact right move, we will be frozen in time like Han Solo, and we will never be able to make another decision again. If you get there and you're like, oh shoot, okay, maybe that wasn't the smartest maneuver, great, you're going to figure out the next thing. And maybe your intuition was calling you down that path because you actually needed the lesson you were going to learn, not the end result you thought was going to emerge. So if you learn to trust that thing that is guiding you, you are always being given the tools and the keys that you need to get to the next place that you're trying to go. But man, you are not going to get there if you just stay here debating the next right move.
Exactly. It's better to take a step in what you think is the wrong direction to get more data, to learn new things, to then pivot to the right direction. But yeah, there is no quote unquote perfect decision.
Yes.
And there is no absolute decision either, where, most decisions that we make in our lives, it is not irreversible, but we kind of treat it like it is. Like, if we move to a place that we don't like, is it an inconvenience? Yes. But is it going to end your life? Probably not. But now you know what you don't like for sure. And now, what if you move to that place and now you talk to a person that then showed you the more ideal place that you wanted, that you didn't even know existed, right? So it's
Absolutely.
like, intuition isn't always going to, help you make the quote unquote right decision, but it's going to lead you in the right direction. And the direction is more important. Life is a journey, not a destination. So there is no end to this. And so what I love to do is to remove the pressure from making the right decision, as if it's going to be absolute and just fundamentally shift my life where it's irreversible damage. I'm just like, okay, I can handle whatever it is that comes, and I just want to trust this instinct. I would rather just move and do that and learn from it, rather than just stay frozen in fear for the rest of my life and just wonder what if. A great example, if for listeners here, if a lot of them are moms, it's like, how did you know how to raise your child?
Exactly.
Like, how to take care of your baby? Like, did you read a textbook cover to cover? Like, what did you do in those situations when your baby was crying, when they needed food or not, or whatever it is? Like, you relied on maternal instinct, and like, why? Like, if that's led you to where you are now, and you're able to take care of the child and raise them, it's like, why wouldn't you be able to trust that same instinct in every other part of your life? If you truly are coming from a place of love, compassion, and care, why does it matter about what decision you choose? Because all of them are probably in alignment with those values that you have.
Yeah.
So you'd rather
that's so
choose to move that energy more into the world and to act from that place and to keep going, rather than to stay frozen in fear and not able to act out of that same type of instinct and love. So yeah, making any decision is better than making no decision.
I have said this so many times lately. I just finished up a book tour, and I said this on almost every stop because this question kept coming up a lot. And I'm like, y'all, literally do anything. Making any choice, moving in any direction is better than you staying in this spot for another year. Because it's exactly what you said, Joseph, there isn't a right choice. There's just the
Right.
next choice. And
Yes.
if you're moving, there's like, I really believe God, the universe, like it rises up to meet you. But it can't rise up to meet you if you have been standing at this crossroads for the
Right.
last 6 years. Truly do anything. And the decision to make a move, even if it's a small one, will help to erode the fears that you have about that movement. I know it sounds silly, but if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I keep debating if I should leave my job, but that's just so terrifying and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I don't, get bangs. Truly, like just do something wild, do something different, do something that shakes up the stasis that you find yourself in, to remind yourself that if you get bangs and it was a terrible choice because you don't have the face structure, well, sister, at least you did something and they will grow out and you will be fine. But
Yeah, that sounds very
staying here,
personal.
staying here debating it is not serving you.
That's like, yeah, probably the best advice, right? Like an object in motion will stay in motion, or an object not in motion will stay not in motion, right? So you always want to be moving that energy. What doesn't move pretty much dies, and what
Yes.
does move stays alive. Same thing with a river, right? Like, or any body of water, when it becomes stagnant, it becomes polluted, and things in it are not able to survive. But when there's moving water, like a river, there's so much life there. The soil there is full of nutrients and things like that. So, movement is key. I mean, everything is constantly changing and moving. Like that's how nature is. That's how Earth is. We're meant to model that. But life is a mirror. So whatever we do, it will be met back. And that's kind of how I approach it. And yeah, it's very liberating when you're able to do that. When we're kind of in paralysis, I always like to ask myself, like if it's a major decision, like trying to, stay or in a job, or leave and get another job, that might be a really, really big decision that they might not be able to make right now. But is there, what's like the smallest possible action? Like that's a framework that I like to use, SPA, right? Smallest possible action that I can do towards making this decision or this goal. Let's say it is like deciding whether to leave your job or not. Well, you don't have to decide whether to leave your job yet. What's like something very, very small that you can do? Is it maybe updating your resume? Right? That's not deciding to leave yet.
Yeah.
Can you embellish it? Can you add more with your experience now? Can you even apply for jobs, right? If you feel called to, maybe talking to other people in different companies, right? Like working your network. What are other actions that you can do that would move you in the right general direction? Think direction, not like absolute decision. And that will get you closer and closer to what you want. And maybe you decide when you're talking to other people in different companies, everyone is going through the same thing. A lot of companies aren't great. And then you realize that your company is actually pretty good and it has better benefits, and you're doing something you like and doing all, and you find out more information, right? To help you make that decision. So that, applying that framework of doing the smallest possible action will generally lead you down the right path. And that's what I love doing. And it's worked really, really beautifully to minimize the fear, right, of making that grand decision, right? If it's to move, right, have you even started looking at different places yet? Have you even traveled there yet? Have you stayed there? So if not, like just make those tiny decisions and kind of go into like experimentation mode, and don't worry about fear, like, or don't worry about failure, right? There's no point in like kind of deeming things as absolute failures. Like there's really no such thing as that. You learn from it so much. And so what if that failure led to your success? So like, is that really failure? Like, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So to label these things as absolutes just doesn't help us at all. And again,
Yeah.
that just comes from the thinking mind, of the judgmental mind, of wanting to label things concretely. But when you kind of suspend judgment, then you have a lot more freedom and liberation to kind of move where you want to move.
So cool. Joseph, you are a wealth of information and ideas, and I love how tactical you are. If the audience is listening to this and they are one of the 3 people who have not yet read your book, because I feel like it is everywhere and everyone has it, will you tell them about the book? Will you tell them where they can get it? Like, give them all the details so they can take a deeper dive with you.
Yes. So the book is called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And then my name, Joseph Nguyen. You can look it up on Amazon. You can go to bookstores like Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. It's probably wherever you buy books. It doesn't really matter where you buy as long as you get the book. Like what's more important is you being able to get the book. It's on Audible as well if you prefer audiobooks. You can also go to my website, josephngwyen.org, and find everything that I have there, all my work. And then a newsletter is also there if you want to subscribe. But yeah, that's I mean, the core premise of the book is just that, like, how are you able to let go of the thinking that's creating, all of the emotional suffering in life? If you want to get very, very, very tactical, there is one framework in the book that does help guide someone step by step through how to do that. I can quickly go through that so that they have something they can latch onto and use
Yeah,
it
for sure.
in real time.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that that's there. Because just saying like just let go, like people, it's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
So the framework I've created is called PAUSE. So it's an acronym. So every single letter stands for something. The first letter is P, which is pause and take deep breaths. Like you were saying, the box breathing method is fantastic. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. That's also used by the military, to like lower their heart rate. It's like fantastic. Another method is 4-7-8, breathing in for 4, holding for 7, releasing for 8. Doesn't matter. You don't even have to use any of those. Just do deep breathing, and it will work. It's like proven to lower your heart rate and activate your parasympathetic nervous system so that you are calmer. So first step, pause and take deep breaths. Why I love that so much is that you cannot take a breath in the past. You cannot take a breath in the future. You can only take a breath in the present. And that is where peace is. That is where things actually are and exist. So that's what you can do for the first step. Pause and take deep breaths. Number 2 is ask. Ask yourself, is this thinking useful? Is this helping me? Is this thinking helping me? If not, the next step is which is understand that you have the choice to let go of that thinking or that judgment. Then S is say and repeat the mantra, thinking is the root cause of suffering. Or you can use a different mantra, or any mantra for that matter, but another example would be, I let go and choose peace. Why mantras are so powerful is because it suspends thinking. Our minds generally can only focus on one thing, like you're saying, like just that one singular point on the wall. By using a mantra, you're focusing on this one phrase. And what it does is you can't really think about anything else if you're repeating this phrase in your mind. And then number 2, if it's rooted in truth, you will begin to embody it subconsciously and therefore believe it. So thinking is the root cause of suffering is what I use. You can use the other one or any other empowering mantra, right, that you have that is grounded in truth. That, in line with the breathing, will significantly reduce the kind of intensity of the anxiety that you're going through. E is the last letter, which is experience your emotions fully without resistance. This is, this method isn't to bypass your emotions and just like say, oh, I'm not going to think about it. It's actually to allow you to experience your emotions without any sort of judgment about it. Because remember, the judgment of our emotions is what perpetuates it. It's what keeps it locked there, right? For every force, there's an equal opposite force, right? Like we learn in physics. So if there's a force of judgment, it will perpetuate the force of the emotion. Without the judgment, there is no opposing force for the emotion, so it will pass through us much more easily. Watch what happens when you're able to hold your emotions without labeling it as right, wrong, good, bad, whether you're lovable or not, like just suspend all of that and watch what happens to the emotion. It transmutes right before your eyes. So that's the whole entire framework. So P, pause and take deep breaths. A, ask yourself, is this thinking useful? Is it helping me? If not, understand that you have the capacity to let it go. You don't have to believe everything you think. You don't have to keep thinking about this. And then S is say and repeat the mantra, right? Thinking is the root cause of suffering, or I let go and choose peace. And then E, experience your emotions fully without resistance. Go through that framework. It only takes a few minutes max. And as you do that in real time, you can do this with your eyes open, right? This is how I was able to integrate the benefits of meditation into real life, is doing this while I was working, while I'm in a meeting, right? Like I'm, in a meeting that we don't want to be in. Like just do that. And you'll probably experience a lot more peace. If we're having an argument with our significant other, just say, hey, can we pause? Like literally pause, and then do this framework, and then come back when your nervous system is a little bit more regulated. And why this framework is so powerful is because it combines, it's not just one modality. It combines multiple different modalities. It combines cognitive behavioral therapy by questioning the thinking, right? It also combines Vipassana meditation, so just observing the thoughts and letting them be as they are, and transcendental meditation, which is mantra-based to transcend, the thinking mind. And so, and it also helps you kind of, learn acceptance in that regard. So it combines all different modalities that I found to be most helpful. So, you can look up all those methods and they're, all like basically proven to help relieve anxiety. But now it's in a very, very simple framework that you can remember, so you can use it whenever you need. So just try this, right? This doesn't have to be something you commit to for 10 years, right? Like, I'm not asking you to become a monk. shave your head or do anything like that. You can get bangs if you want, or you don't have to. But just try this out for 7 days. Suspend judgment for 7 days and see how it improves your life. If it doesn't, no problem. You don't have to follow the method. You can find something else that works for you. But the only way to know, you don't even have to believe what I'm saying. Just try it out for yourself. 7 days. That's all you need. And then see if it improves your life. If it does, keep using it. If it doesn't, find something else too. Because there's always something you can do. So that's my best recommendation. And so I hope it helps.
Yeah. Joseph, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you sharing your story, opening up, and just being so authentic. So thank you so much for making the conversation just so passionate and exciting.
The Rachel Hollis Podcast is produced by me, Rachel Hollis. It's edited by Andrew Weller and Jack Noble.
It's starting to sound like spring, but it's not official till you've lit up the grill with Kingsford Original Charcoal. This time of year, as we break in the backyard with friends and family, everything tastes better cooked with authentic wood-fired barbecue flavor. Thanks to Kingsford. Welcome, spring. Visit kingsford.com for charcoal and more from America's grilling expert.
Don't miss Grand Slam deals going on now at Academy Sports and Outdoors from March 3rd to March 16th. If you are a sports mom like I am, this is the time of year to get the deals. Get up to 50% off bats, gloves, and training gear from brands like Rawlings, Easton, Wilson, Marucci, Louisville Slugger, and more. Need it fast? Choose same-day delivery powered by DoorDash. Order by 4 p.m., get it by 8 p.m. Shop your local Academy store or academy.com.